Good afternoon. Thanks for dialing in and taking part in Cognism's third in series webinar, How to Build a High-Performing Sales Team for B2B Outbound. I'm Nick Roberts of Cognism. I'm pleased to be the moderator today. We've got a great program and panel. Before we introduce them, let's cover their housekeeping. How this is going to work is that it's going to be a live recording that will run for up to an hour. For you, the audience, after this event, we'll send you both a recording and the slides. If you have any questions, please send them across the question and answer section at the end. And make them as nicely and specific as possible so we can really give some great value here. Connected to this webinar are two previous ones, How to Build a Predictable Revenue Outbound Engine and Mastering Account-Based Marketing. So if there's any sales concepts that you'd like to become more familiar with, perhaps they've been covered there. So let's get started with this webinar. What makes this event special is that we have two individuals who have an abundance of experience and are performing practitioners in creating high-performance sales teams. To our panelists, in addition to welcoming you, I'd like you to share the size and structure of your respective teams. I am pleased to introduce, firstly, from SalesLoft, the Sales Development Manager, Colin Waldrop. SalesLoft is a leading sales engagement platform that is US Atlanta originated in 2011. The company has grown to 2,000 customers, 300 employees, 50 million revenue, and have just recently launched here into EMEA. Hello, Colin.
Okay, I think we're having a bit of issues. I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. Thanks for that, Nick. So my name is Nazma Kurban. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Cognism. I was the first employee and I helped build the outbound sales engine today. And so when we first started, it was just myself as the only 360 sales role. And now we've built the sales and marketing team, which I am responsible for, which includes up to about 35 reps.
Thanks so much, Nazma. So the agenda for this webinar, we are going to talk about the formation, how to structure and hire your team, how to motivate your team, how to develop the team, how to measure the performance of the team, and then how to fix, adjust any issues, and then enhancement for that team. So first segue, team structure and hiring.
So the way that we've currently basically manage and have structured our team is basically leads from the Predictable Revenue Engine, which it was nicely illustrated in a book by Aaron Ross. And so if you haven't read that book, I really recommend, if you're looking to build out that engine, to have a good read. So the premise is that core outputs need to be owned by one focused role. And so how this has been implemented at Cognism is that we have focused roles on, as an example for the SDRs, on booking meetings and creating opportunities. These are called SDRs or BDRs. And once the meeting is booked, the leaders then pass on to an AE, and we call them BDMs at Cognism, and they are focused on generating revenue for the business. Once we close a customer, then the customer is taken care of by customer success, and this person is responsible on ensuring that the customer retains and is focused on retention of that customer. And what this really is it's been derived from Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour work rule, where if you put the number of hours in, you'll surely become an expert. So with this process, you will find that your team become experts in their fields. So our SDRs are solely focused on generating leads. Our AEs are solely focused on generating revenue. And what we found is that if they spend their time focused on those outputs, they surely ensure that they are driving efficiencies within their certain outputs. And so what you have is a conveyor belt where everyone has their certain metrics and output that they're responsible for. And I know personally, for having lots of peers in SaaS businesses, that this is a process that many SaaS businesses have adopted.
Okay, great. That's good. So so it's very specialized. Everyone has a focus on their role, and that they're all ultimately contributing to the engine to drive the end results. And on the right hand side is the progression for the various roles. Mm-hmm. Could you talk us through that?
Sure. So this is actually quite specific to Cognizant in itself. So what we found as we grew, because initially we only had like an SDR role and then a BDM role, is that it was quite important for us to create layers of progression within the organization. So an SDR would be focused on, let's just say, in our case, 10 qualified opportunities per month. And then once they've been able to achieve their targets and hit their milestone, they'll then be promoted to a senior SDR position, which is where their targets are increased and then they are promoted. And once they've surpassed the senior SDR metrics and their progression plan, then they'll be promoted to either BDM, or they can go on and be promoted into an enterprise SDR. So there's lots of different roles that you can create within the sales engine, and it's very dependent on your own specific revenue or sales function. So when we first started, we purely had SDRs and BDMs, and now we have 6 iterations of roles within the sales organization. So it always needs to be specific to the organization.
Great, that's very insightful, and it's what's interesting that there is a cross optionality. So once you follow the path, so for example, the senior SDR, you can actually move across to a sales team lead.
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay, so moving on. So obviously connected to this is hiring, and what are the key considerations when you're thinking about adding headcount to your predictable revenue team?
Okay, so one thing just to note on is that we have organic growth within Cognizant. So anybody that is sitting within the sales organization today started off in the business as an SDR. So we have a very organic, I guess, process, and the characteristics that we look for are always based around SDRs and the kind of skill sets that we would look for. So it's not necessarily whether we were looking for somebody who's good at generating relationship or good at maintaining relationships. We just want somebody who would be able to get onto the phone, follow cadences, and basically generate those opportunities. And so what does a good, I guess, SDR look like? For us, it's definitely resilience. So I look for people who have had experience with resilience in the past and have been able to overcome challenging situations. And I'd like to be able to surface that in the interview process. And always look for overachievement, whether that's in sporting, whether that is academic, or whether that is a personal achievement that they've been able to achieve. That's also something that we look for. I think that being in a role as an SDR, you're constantly being told no, so it's really important to be resilient. And also, you're going to be surrounded by a lot of competitive individuals. And so if you're an overachiever, you're naturally going to be quite competitive. And I think the third thing for me that is really important is that I always want somebody who wants to progress and learn sales specifically. And so you get, and this has definitely happened to us when during the interview process, when I have somebody come in for an interview, but perhaps they want to end up going into marketing, or perhaps wanting to go into product development and want to just try out sales. I feel like those individuals that perform really well and in an SDR role are those who are very focused on developing their sales skills, because they are motivated to get to the next level within the sales progression. So those are the characteristics that I would look for. And so the next question, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So in summary, resilience, achievement, and a passion for sales. Very insightful.
I think I'm in now, by the way.
Fantastic, great stuff. We all experiencing this in sales, where not everything being versatile and adaptable. Colin, so where we're at is we've kind of, just to recap, so Colin is the sales development manager at Sales Loft. Just so the audience can get a grasp of you, just give us a little insight into your sales team you have at Sales Loft.
Yeah, so I'll start. So I actually started at Sales Loft when we were right around 130 employees. I started as an SDR right out of college. I sat with 6 people in a room who were around me, and then today we've got a little over 500 employees, and I sit with about 46 SDRs. To hit on the last slide, to go ahead and start catching up, we have a very similar structure as Cognizant. The only thing we do differently is on our outbound SDRs, we split it up into segments. So we have an SMB segment, we have a mid-market segment, we have an enterprise segment. And that's how we go after business. And we also do that for our SEs as well. And I think we are caught up to hiring.
Okay, fantastic, great stuff. So yeah, we're on the hiring section here. Colin, for yourself, when you're considering hiring, what are the considerations that you will be thinking about?
Yeah. So for me, I think you need to take a step back, and similar to what she was saying, I think you need to understand what are the must-have characteristics that someone has to have to do well at the job. This is where you're going to find examples like resilience. And then you need to break down what resilience means, and then you need to test for it in an interview. So for example, like resilience to me is like, I want to see that you're hardworking. I don't want this SDR job to be your first go at working hard. I want to look at your resume, and I want to know that when you were in college, did you sign up for a lot of organizations? Were you part of a lot of things? If not, did you work a couple jobs? Like, are you used to working hard? I want to see that you set goals, and you can understand that by asking, why did you do this? What when you did this, what was it to accomplish? You can ask someone for their goals, like current goals, and you're going to figure out if they came up with them on the spot or if they have always had those goals. And I also want to see if someone doesn't get down when you throw them off. And so part of the interview is me trying to throw someone off and seeing how they bounce back. And so I think you come up with these key characteristics like resilience, and then you implement that in the hiring process and make sure you can check boxes off like that. And I don't think they have to be stagnant. I think they change when you have SDRs who underperform or maybe struggle or leave the organization. I think it's our job to analyze, like, hey, what did they not have, or what did they need to have to do well at this role? And I think you start including that in the interview process. Like for me, I've noticed that reps that struggle have a hard time being creative. And so now in the interview, I want to test for creativity. And I think you always have to implement things like that.
Okay, that's very interesting hearing about the creativity point.
And I'm really glad that you actually covered the actual interview questions that we should ask. And I think I want to follow up with the kind of questions that we ask that aren't really standard interview questions for an SDR. And so we really want people that are focused on having a career in sales. And one of the questions that we always ask, which is a bit of a sideball, is, well, we are also recruiting for another role within the organization, and that role could be customer success, or it could be marketing. And we basically say that it's, you'll have pretty much the same progression plan, and you might get an increase of salary in comparison to SDR, and to see how they feel about actually applying for that role. And what we found was that those that are open aren't actually really focused on SDR or a sales role. And so we've used this on a number of occasions to actually weed out some bad fits and also hire great individuals that fit perhaps into marketing or customer success. So I would say that we always ask questions just to derive whether they genuinely want to be in sales, or and if there's any other way that we can actually get out the answer to that.
That's really great, Nazma. I guess always the kind of classic question is, when you've really got a candidate that you really like, how do you close them? What's your tactics?
I mean, I guess it depends on the company. I mean, so I come from a startup world, and I think when you're selling somebody to come to a startup, you're selling them on buying into leadership, and you're selling them on buying into the vision of your company. And I think some of the best ways to sell somebody is to talk about how you grew at a company faster than the rate of your own experience, is something our CEO Kyle says. And so, for me, if I was trying to close somebody in an interview today, which I have right after this, I'm going to say I'm 2 years out of college. I'm a year into management, and I'm on a webinar talking to a CRO about how to build a high-performing sales team, and I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for this company. And I think when you show that level of passion and what a company did for you in an interview, I mean, you get a candidate to want to buy into that, and then the money kind of becomes secondary.
I would completely agree on that. And I think when you have a larger organization, it's really simple for candidates to come in and have a look at the other individuals within the organization, see their progression, and be bought in by the culture and by the progression. But I think what's even more challenging is when you have a startup and you don't actually have examples. And if I think back to the early days when there was nobody, and there was a 4-person office where only I sat in, and there wasn't a progression plan, and we didn't know where we were going to go. I think one of the things that one of my mentors taught me was that you really need to be selling the dream and the vision. And so, I mean, you have to be bonkers to be in the startup very early on, and take that risk. And, having a grander vision than what might not be as obvious to us. I think during the interview process, I certainly did that with my first few hires, where I spoke to them about my vision. And even a year ago, I was talking to the SDRs that I was hiring that now have been in the company for a year, about how we were going to be like the best like sales team in the UK and eventually in the world. And I think that's definitely motivated them. And so just creating a vision of exactly where you want to be, and what the opportunity is going to be for those reps that come in as, you know, first, second hires. I know one of the first hires that we brought in is now a sales director. So there's lots of opportunities, and I think that you just need to create that vision of that it's possible, and have people being completely bought into the vision of the startup.
So in summary, 3 words: passion, progression, and vision. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next segue. How do you guys drive the right behaviors? And I'll open it up to Colin.
I'll let Nazma focus on the compensation. I think for us, in a large part of my role is incentives and the structure and communicating the progression paths. And when I think incentives, I think about like kickers on compensation. Like, you know, if you schedule more than your quota, then you get a 25% bump on each of those meetings, things like that. But a lot of this, I think, comes down to how do you motivate your team to run efficiently. And I think the first step of that is anytime we're bringing on a new person, I think the most important step is sitting them down and understanding what motivates them. I think you'd be surprised. Like, you get answers like, you know, for me, my silver bike, or what motivates me is I want to buy this Harley. And then you say, you know, in a rough week, you know, you say something like, hey, if you hit your number this week, I'll give you $200 to put towards your Harley. It's still $200. But now it's attached to this Harley or something they're really, really wanting. You know, some reps have families and they appreciate the time with their family. So it's motivating them that, hey, if you accomplish this, you know, take Friday off and go spend it with your family, and understanding what really drives that specific rep. I think as far as team motivation goes, I've noticed that SDRs really just want recognition. I think you often feel like you're at the bottom of a totem pole for a company. And I feel like they just want to get recognized. And so anything you can do, I think you should ask yourself, like, am I making sure a rep is recognized when they do something right? I think that's the number one thing you need to keep in mind. And as far as structure, I would say micro promotions. SDR1, SDR2, SDR3 is how we set it up over here. And it gives you something to look forward to. It's added responsibility at each stage. And you'll be surprised how often reps want that responsibility. They want to be a mentor when they reach SDR2. They want to be a team lead when they reach SDR3, and they work for those things. So.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And I would 100% agree with you. Like, these are things that we've actually evolved as a business, and we had a pretty simple structure and progression plan. And I think as we've evolved and as we've had a lot more reps take care of and look at the progression plans and motivate them and create progression plans for them, we've had to look at micro promotions, and it makes such a big difference. I mean, just promoting somebody and putting senior in front of their job title, the first thing they want to do is just upload their LinkedIn profile and call their parents. So I think it's super, super important. And this actually ties in nicely with our organic growth. And I think that we definitely wouldn't have been able to create like an outbound structure of performance if we didn't have these micro progression paths, or even micro job titles, where we've increased their capacity. And once we've increased their capacity, we know that, or their targets, we know that it's going to feed into the BDMs or the AEs, and therefore we'll be over capacity, and it will just make more room for progression. So I would 100% agree around like structure and progression paths. And how do we compensate the sales team? So this has also evolved. I think in the beginning it was all around meetings booked, because that was what every single book that I read and any other company that I'd worked for did. But I think it must have been around 6 months ago when I started learning about how high performing outbound teams were really compensating and really focusing on the output. So now what we do is we basically compensate our teams on their output, and that output is what we actually want to get out of the team. So with the SDRs, we don't necessarily want meetings, we want sales qualified opportunities. So now we're compensating our sales teams, our SDRs, on the sales qualified opportunities that they are targeted to achieve. And same with the BDMs, they all have a target, and as soon as they are hitting their target, then they get a bumper. Our managers is also very simple. I want all of my managers within the teams to have every single person under their remit to be performing at 100%. And so they are compensated on every single person in their team's performance. And so if there is anybody within the team that is not performing, then it's really going to hurt their compensation. So really think about what you want to get out of that individual, and then basically create a compensation plan that aligns with the output that you're looking for. And marketing development reps is something that we've done that's new to us, and we want to increase conversion rates of all of the content that we have. So we again have actually created a compensation plan that is aligned to the output that we want from those individuals.
Okay, that's really interesting, the alignment of the team all coming together. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next segue. So top tips for training and culture, and this, I will move this on to Colin first.
Yeah, for us, I know internally, I think one of the best things you can do is having call libraries. I mean, I think most startups, I think they're making a lot of business on the phone, even if it's directing for like emails, videos, things like that, directing people to phones. And so I think having libraries of the phone calls is one of the best levers you can pull. I mean, even if you break it down by personas, like we sell to VPs of sales. And so having a library of every call we've had that's gone to a demo that we had with a VP of sales, so that when you start, there's no confusion on what a good call with a VP of sales sounds like, or maybe a sales manager, sales ops, whatever your personas are. So I'd say having those libraries of diving into, what a good call sounds like is really important. I'd also say, what's a bad call sound like? We do something called crash and burn here, where every Wednesday the whole team gets pulled into a room and we listen to a call where somebody maybe had a great call but didn't book the meeting. And when you hear somebody else, maybe drop the ball on a call, one, there's this level of confidence in a rep because everybody is out there kind of falling on their face. But two, you hear things maybe you say on a call and you say, yeah, like I say that too, and it doesn't sound good. I'm gonna go ahead and stop that. And then some other things I would say that are really effective over here is workshops every morning, where one morning you pick a topic. Maybe it's like cold call intros. The next morning it's value props, where you say, here's the scenario. How can you help my business? The next day it's maybe objection handling. So they're just every week training on objections, and then it's email writing. Workshops have been really beneficial. And I would say the last thing for us, and the most beneficial thing we've ever done, is persona training, where you actually pull in the people you sell to, especially if you're going up market or selling to a new vertical and you're not too familiar with it. If you've closed a deal, pull in that persona, bring them into the office, and let the SDRs talk to them, someone who made the decision to buy your product, and say, hey, why'd you buy our product? And hearing it from the actual persona is a lot different than hearing it from management to tell you this is how they feel. Let them actually tell you how they feel.
Colin, I love that persona training, and the fact you actually bring the customer into the office. That's really live, and I can imagine very impactful.
Okay, and so now we're going to be talking about training, and I just basically we had a bit of a crisis earlier on with not being able to connect with Colin, and so I basically just like one of my sales team managers, or actually our sales team manager here at Cognism, because I thought it'd be nice for me and him to bounce off different questions, because I thought maybe Colin won't be able to connect, but he's here with me and he actually runs all of the training. So I thought, yeah, it might be a good idea for him to talk through exactly all the training that he's implemented. So David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi guys. Yeah, David Bentham. I run the SDRs here at Cognism. I suppose I'm in quite a unique position in the sense that I was here at the start of the year, and we've grown from 5 to I think like 18 reps now. And so training's been a huge part of that, just because of the high turnover that we had. I think the biggest thing for us that's probably unique to Cognism is our mentor-mentee scheme that we run. So we throw people into positions where as soon as you move up in the role to a, say, senior SDR, you instantly inherit a mentee who you help guide, and that really takes a lot of pressure off the individual team leads and managers in terms of training. And the way that we do that is we actually make it a part of their progression as well. And we say that, being a brilliant mentor is a really important way to aid your progression within the company. Just so they're motivated to keep training. And I think that organically creates a culture within the whole group of helping each other out and sending each other like blogs and articles and especially in where we are in terms of like our high high growth stage, that's been a really, really good way of helping us scale efficiently.
What would you say though in the last year? Because I mean, our training was pretty ad hoc even when you started,
Yeah.
and it was just like recordings and everyone just sitting around just ripping the recordings apart. What would you say out of everything that is listed here, it has been the most impactful training that we've implemented?
We really, really focus on the phone. I think one thing that might be different between Colin and I is here in Europe, like we definitely believe in more of a multi-channel approach, whereas in the US, I think the general approach is very call heavy. But in terms of the training, we really, really concentrate on the phone. So when they're onboarded, for the first 2 weeks, all they do is call. We're using Salesloft, we automate all of their emails, so they don't even need to show any focus in that area. They will move on to touch points on LinkedIn, but we really just concentrate on phones first and foremost. We've implemented a weekly training sprint that's always guided by reps' feedback. So we ask the reps what they'd like to do and how that progressed. And then we do group weekly calls. All of these things are optional. And the reason they're optional is because then again, it's driven and guided by the individual reps to be motivated to want to come and be there.
And I just the one thing that I would say about our training, which is unique, that I know that a lot of businesses don't do, is that within the first week, on the third day, every single SDR that is onboarded is actually on the phones and having real life conversations and basically really learning exactly what it's like to be an SDR rather than having training in a classroom kind of style and just listening to calls, because everyone's just so worried and anxious and getting onto the phone. But if it's the third day, they're already familiar with the feeling of making those cold calls, and I think that's definitely accelerated the growth. Because I'm sure, and maybe this is just me just saying about Cognizant, but we've always had an SDR that's onboarded, book a meeting in the first week, and I think that is definitely kudos to the fact that we're actually putting them on the phones. So my advice to the audience and everyone listening is just get them onto the phone as soon as possible, and you're not going to be burning leads, because that's usually what people are worried about. You're going to get onto the phone, you're going to give them good leads, they're going to burn them. You'll just end up recycling the same leads, even if it's 3-4 months on. People forget about you. So don't worry about the quality of the leads that you have. Just get them to pick up the phone, and if they reject or they're not interested, then put them into the nurture queue and just give them, just resurface them in the next few months, and it will just be as good quality as an original lead.
Dave, that's very interesting, the whole mentor-mentee structure, and then the virtually getting new starters to get on the phone straight away. Colin, out of curiosity, what's the process for your new starters?
Yeah, I love that. So when I started at Salesloft, it was here's 2 books, Predictable Revenue and Sales Development Playbook. Go read those, and you're excited for the job. So you read them that night, and you come in the next day, and they say, yeah, that was supposed to take 2 weeks, and so go ahead and hop on the phones. And so I had a very similar. I mean, on my second or third day, I was on the phones. Now, as we've grown as a company, we do have the luxury of having a sales enablement team where your first month is onboarding, and you have to get certified for things. So like a cold call certified, discovery call certified, and demo certified, where you know the product. So before you ever make a call, you're actually getting these certifications. So that's how we do it over here, then.
Thanks, Colin. That's fascinating to hear about the certifications. So we'll move on to the next piece, which is about culture, which obviously in a high-performing sales team is really important. And what we have here is a slide on the Cognizant teamship rules, which I guess it's obvious to get Nasma to talk about this.
Okay, so basically culture is one of the most important fundamental parts of creating a performing sales organization. So just to give you background, I went to see Clive Woodward at a conference last year, and he spoke about how he led the English rugby team to victory in 2003, and something that he implemented were teamship rules. And what he basically said was that if I'm going to tell them what to do, they're just not going to be as committed to delivering. And so what he did was he got every single person in that team into a room and said to them, why don't you create the rules of engagement? So what time everyone should be getting ready for training? What if someone doesn't make the finals? How are you engaging with somebody? How are you collaborating, and how are you engaging and interacting? And for me, I just thought to myself, well, well, this is amazing, right? Rather than dictating what the culture should be or dictating how we should engage with each other, perhaps if I implement or get the team to implement what it means to work as a team and get them to create the rules, it might have an impact. And I went back to the office, I got them all into a room and I said, well, these are the main topics of discussion: timing, punctuality, focus, and productivity, what it means to be working as a team. And I walked away. And so they sat there, and actually I thought it was going to be an hour, but they were in there for 3 hours, basically, because they had so many disagreements around exactly what it means to be working and what sort of rules do they all agree on. And I had veto rights, but fortunately I agreed to all of the rules. And since then, we don't really have any issues with engagement or around culture. Like, people just pull together because they want to work as a team. They understand that, you know, that they are ready to go by 9 because that's a rule that they've actually created, and they feel embarrassed and they'll feel like they're letting themselves down if they're not actually performing. So this is just an example, but it's all around having a culture of inclusivity and basically involving all of your team, you know, whether they are SDRs, whether they are senior individuals in the team, in creating those rules. And if somebody does break the rule, including myself, I had to buy everyone a coffee in the team. So not only do, you know, the SDRs or people that might be junior to myself in the team are creating the rules, if I break them because I've agreed to them, then I'm also like leading by example. And it's just made such a huge impact because everyone feels like they're involved, and they are involved because they create the culture. So this is just one example, but including and we include them in everything. We include them in, even when we're going through a transition of like meetings booked to SQOs, which is basically focused around opportunities created. When we sat down with them and we basically had an open debate. And I don't think a lot of businesses do that. They just go in and then they just basically say, these are the rules, rather than actually getting them brought in. So anytime that I am rolling out something new, maybe something that I've learned, maybe a peer told me, I involve everyone because I want them to be completely buying into the new processes that we have. So I think this definitely helps, and it makes them feel like they're adding value. And yeah.
I can personally say it's quite unique, and it's quite empowering, the inclusivity that everyone feels in within. Do you have any kind of cultural initiatives that you'd like to share?
I think this is incredible. I think the most incredible part about that is it's actually the reps who came up with that, and I think that's so powerful. Letting reps say, "Here's the rules of engagement. Here's what we're going to do to be successful in any scenario." I would say one thing we do along these lines. So we have what's called sacred hours. I forgot what company it came from. We did steal it, but it's hours of the day where nobody can book time during that hour of the SDR's day. And so that is sacred time for the rep, and nothing is going to get in the way of that sacred time. You can do whatever you want with the sacred time, but there's not going to be any interruptions, and there's no reason to not get your work done during the day. So I think that's the only thing we'd really add in to that list.
Okay, so now that I've just heard, Colin, something really occurred to me, which I think is so important. So recently we've been having some debates internally, and it's been channeled to me how actually the team, they want creativity, they want some sort of license to basically just perform without actually having metrics, and because they're all super smart, they hate being micromanaged, but they also understand that it's actually part of like our role as management to understand what is working and what's not, and to get everyone following that same process. And throughout all of this, you know, we went back and these are metrics, right? These are things that I'm actually accountable for, and I'm also I'm basically producing and delivering to my CEO on a weekly basis. And so when I sat down with them to really understand, like, what would good look like and what is going to drive the right behavior, and I don't think a lot of people do that. So when your teams are having challenges, like taking the time to sit back and understand what are the real life challenges that they're facing, so you can actually have those meaningful conversations with those that are making those decisions. So I think that's definitely been something that's been like quite powerful, and they feel like they're valued and they're not just being told what to do. But we agree, we've come to a consensus of like, this is your role and this is how much flexibility that you have, and so they feel like they're valued.
Very good, very good. And kind of like that sacred hour concept as well. So we're going to move on. Just at this stage, what I wanted to just convey to the audience is we are going to provide a recording and the slides at the end of this presentation. And if you do have any questions, specific ones, please send them through and we'll get those answered at the end of the webinar. So moving on to segue 4, the metrics. And so what we have here is the Cognizant capacity model, and I think Nazma's talk us through the metrics and the capacity model.
Okay, great. So this is something that we actually created this time last year, and it's based on all of the metrics and our performance from 2018. And so what I did was I created a model where I reverse engineered the revenue that we needed. And so I understood, for example, in 1 month, if I had the target of 32,000 and one deal would basically equate to 1,000, because our average deal size at that time was 1,000, that we'd need 32. In order for us to close 32 deals, I know, and based on a 25% conversion rate, I know that I'd actually have to have 97 opportunities created. So you can see that we've got 97 there, and we know that the meetings to opportunity conversion rate was 55. And so what we did was we split out outbound and marketing. Marketing actually made up of 2/3 of our revenue at that point, and then 1/3 was outbound. And so what I understood was, in order for us to hit 32K based on 1/3 from SDRs, I'd need 7.5 SDRs. I know that might sound like that might be a lot to take in, but my point is that when you're creating a capacity model and you're looking at outbound, the beauty of outbound is that it's predictable, and to reverse engineer conservatively exactly what you need to achieve. So if your revenue target is a certain amount, understand exactly how many deals you need, what the average deal value would be, how many opportunities you require that are going to be converting, and then that is going to feed into the capacity, which is the outbound. So exactly how many SDRs that you need. And at this time, we were measuring it on meetings booked, and now it's meeting qualified opportunities. But I guess what I'm showing to you right now is a complete outbound predictable model, which actually to the T we hit this year, in the beginning of the year when we had this, and then we tweaked it because we changed the meeting capacity.
That's very interesting. So break down all the processes, know your conversion rates, make sure the inputs are going to meet the outputs you're looking for.
And review this on a weekly basis. And I think a lot of people wait until the month or at the end of the quarter, looking at reviewing whether you're hitting those golden benchmarks. But if you are missing them, you really should be reporting and looking at those metrics on a weekly basis. As a manager, as somebody who is looking after the outbound function, that should be your sole job, ensuring that all those metrics are met. And if there is anything that looks like, well, if you're not hitting them, then that's something that you really need to go and action immediately. Because in a startup, especially scale up, 2 weeks could mean a lot. It can have a huge impact on your pipeline.
Great. And coming to the next slide, so we're now kind of going a bit more granular, looking at specific roles and their inputs and outputs. Colin, what's your take on the metrics that you're focusing on?
Yeah, I would. I mean, of course, we do the calls, we track connect rate, conversion rate on the phone, and account conversion rate. I think account conversion rate is interesting because if the other metrics aren't there, but you have a high account conversion rate, meaning any account you touch, what's the percentage that you get them on a meeting? And I think that's when you realize reps are doing something outside of the norm to book an account. But I would imagine a lot of the listeners here already have existing metrics. And I think a cool activity to do is take your top 3 performers or top 5 performers, and over the last month or quarter, I would get their average metrics. So on average, how many calls did those top performers make every day that led to getting to their number? How many emails did they send? How many videos did they send? How many LinkedIn touches? Everything, measure everything. And then that's kind of the foundation of success for your organization. And you often see that if you have given, like for this, 75 calls a day, it's going to tend to lean towards 75 calls a day because that was their goal. But it gives you a foundation for the rest of the SDRs who are not hitting those numbers. And I think when you're a new SDR team, I think you can determine, it's like, hey, the only chance we have of hitting our revenue numbers, we've got to book 20 meetings a month. But the metrics are actually kind of a guess. Like you can go off of industry benchmarks, but you don't always have those. In that situation, I would say go out there and tell your reps to do what they can to get 20 meetings, and then let's measure the ones who did it. What was the foundation of what led them there, and let's make that our standard.
Okay, brilliant. That's really interesting. Get the average metrics from the top 3 performers and using that as a benchmark. Right, moving on. So the skeleton in the closet, you know, our reality is we're not going to be able to perform all the time. It's just when things are going wrong, how to actually adjust and fix and get things back on track. So managing underperformance. Colin, what do you do when you get in these kind of situations?
Yeah, this is probably near and dear to my heart. So, you know, I was actually an SDR who got put on a pipeline performance 5 months in, and if I didn't hit my number, then I was let go. And I remember the one-on-one where my manager slid the paper over to me that I had to sign my life away. And I remember he slid it over to me and he said, it's like, hey, we're not even going to talk about this. You're better than this. And that's really all I needed to get into gear and go back to my desk and cut out all the inefficiencies and realize there's so many things that I was doing that didn't lead to me getting a demo. It was me just executing activities because I thought that was the goal. And it made me cut out all the waste. And you know, that month I hit my number for the first time. And for the next year, I did the same over and over again and got promoted. But if I had to add a step to it, I would say the first thing we do is we sit down and let the reps self-reflect. Let them come to a realization of what kept them from hitting their number. If it's comparing them to the data around the top performing sales reps, or if it's just them looking at their own metrics. And I would ask them, like, why do you think we're not hitting our number? And if you can come to an agreement on what's holding them back from hitting their number, now you can start setting benchmarks to fix that. So say it's the number of calls they're making. If you're sitting in that one-on-one, it's like, hey, why are we in this spot? And it's like, I don't think I'm making the number of calls. It's like, perfect. I want you to Slack me at the end of every day. If we agree on this, Slack me at the end of every day and let me know how many calls you made. And when they know they have to send that Slack at the end of the day, they're not going to miss that number. And if calls really was the issue, then that'll get fixed. Another thing we'll look at is efficiency scores. And so on average, how many activities does it take you to book a meeting? You know, we've got some reps who it takes 100 activities, and you may have a rep who it takes 800. That means the rep at the bottom is having to work 8 times as hard, and they're not going to make 1,500 calls in a day. So usually you backtrack it. They're like, hey, we need to work on skill. That's why it's taking us so many activities. And so then it's putting benchmarks in place of like, hey, I want you doing X amount of mock calls with these reps over the week. I want you to put X amount of time on my calendar to do email training or video training or call training. And it's mapping out a clear playbook or plan for that month of how to overcome that obstacle that you both agree on it, manager and rep. And then you overcome it. And if you don't, then it may be a sign that it's just not a fit.
Okay, that's great. That in summary, self-reflection and how to map a clear plan for overcoming obstacles. David, what's your take on underperformance?
Yeah, I think I'd reiterate a lot of what Colin said in terms of you know, it's noticing, first things first is identifying underperformance and saying this person or individual needs help, and then going through very carefully with themselves like what the problem is, but being very focused on that one individual. I think honestly, at Cognizant we have a very, very similar system to Colin, but the main thing that I'd really add is that I think it's the responsibility of all managers to put 100% into any underperforming rep. We put all responsibility, whether it be high achievers or low achievers, completely on the managers. And like if you don't do that, then you know you can't. There's no way of like properly handling this scenario. So yeah, we identify underachievement. We then put them on what we call a performance plan. We give them way more time with their managers, with their leads. We concentrate on, if activity is a problem, we concentrate on activity. If skills are the problem, we concentrate on skills. So very, very similar to what sales are doing as well. But the key is just put 100% into that rep and really feel like you've done everything for them. If you do end up making an ultimate decision on it.
And in my experience with the other businesses that I've worked with, when it's poor performance or when someone goes on a performance improvement plan, it's almost perceived as, okay, so how are we going to basically work and perhaps like educate this person that it might not be the right role for them. And actually, when we put somebody on a performance improvement plan in our business, we're basically putting all of our resources, and actually the accountability, as David said, goes on to the managers. So at that point, we don't give 80%, we give 100% to ensure that we're getting the most out and we're supporting that individual out of it. So I think that managing of underperformance is that we are completely devoted to ensuring that they understand why they're underperforming, and then we work with them. And there will be situations where we are unable to get them out of underperformance, but that's not usually a skill thing. That's usually because they might not actually want to, they're not enjoying the role anymore, and it might not be the right fit for them. Great,
thanks Nazma. We're actually, it's really great to see we're getting lots of questions here. So and we're really enjoying the wealth of knowledge and information you guys are sharing with us today. So we're going to move on. What we've got, actually, we've got a couple of slides of some of the tools that we're using here at Cognizant. So here we have a dashboard which helps an SDR understand his metrics and where he's at that stage. And we also have, in touching on best practice, two sequences there. Well, it seems incredibly relevant, but Colin, given your nature of your business, and to touch just quickly on cadences, any top tips for our audience today?
Yeah, and so what you're looking at on the screen, I mean, over here at SalesLoft, we run a very similar play, and so we run out of 2 cadences. And so one is a hyper-personalized cadence, and so this is where we put our top 1 and 2 tier prospects. And this is a very time-consuming cadence, but it has a high conversion. And so the first step is you're going to see research, and it's actually a rep developing a hypothesis of why they think they can add value specifically to that business. And so it's going on their website, seeing who they sell to, you know, for us at least, seeing who they sell to, what could be difficult about selling to them. But it's basically forming a hypothesis on why you can help that account. And then you're using that hypothesis in like any emails you're writing, any videos you're sending, and LinkedIn touches. We also do more warm calls here, so not as scripted. So we're actually referring to warm interactions. I mean, it's actually pretty hard to schedule a straight cold call. I mean, someone not knowing you or your company, and 5 minutes later, them dedicating 45 minutes, especially if it's more of an enterprise sell. And so it's warming up that call if you don't already have anything warm to refer to. And so for us, you know, we may send a gift as the very first step, or have that hypothesis. And then our intros for our calls are just saying like, hey, this is Colin, like I sent over that, you know, that dog gift for your dog. I saw that, you know, you had a dog. I was curious if you got that. Or if we send a video, it's like, hey, I sent you over that video. Didn't expect to win any Oscars. I was just curious if you got that. And it warms up the calls for us. And so that's a very personalized cadence. Cadence 2 is going to be for like tier 3 prospects. And it's going to be more automated. It's going to be more high volume. It's to get the rep on the phone and figuring out if that company is going to be a fit. There's something missing, like we don't know if one of the qualifiers are there. And the only thing I'd add to that is at the end of those cadences, having an automation rule where when it ends, it automatically goes into a nurturer where it's out of sight for the SDR. And 3 months down the line, if that prospect's clicking around on an email, it all of a sudden becomes high priority again, but it's not on the SDR's radar until the prospect decides to engage. And that's pretty much our strategy over here.
Colin, that's great. That's really insightful, the whole warming up concept with videos and GIFs and the definitions of tier 3 prospects. So moving on to segue 6, technology to power the team. The point here is that there's been an explosion of technology in the past few years. So people are asking, how do they build their tech stack? It's especially poignant given the fact that both our organizations are technology businesses. So what we have here is the tech stack at Cognizant. So perhaps Naz would like to talk to us about what our tech stack is and what's your thinking behind it.
Okay, yeah, so you can see we've got a number of different, we've got some very well-known brands here like Salesforce and LinkedIn. And so Salesforce was, when I first started, we had the free version on HubSpot, and I really struggled working with it, to be completely honest with you, because I was always quite familiar with Salesforce. So it was one of the first technologies that I'd implemented because I was very familiar with how it would work, and it just helped manage the entire pipeline from lead through to opportunity closed. And we've got Cognizant, so we use Cognizant, our own data, to outreach to those individuals. We've got Vidyard, so we're all about being creative and innovative with outreaching to prospects. So you can see we've got ReachDesk, which is a gift servicing platform, along with Vidyard, which is a video platform. And then we use cluster intelligence, and that's for our reporting, which is more on a BDM and management layer. One thing that I would add when I'm just looking at the tech stacks and how, when we've actually decided to implement, they've all been implemented at different parts of the business. So in the beginning, we had Salesforce, we had Cognizant, we had LinkedIn. And I think when I've thought about implementing tech stacks, it's been because there's been a problem that I wanted to solve. I think with Chili Piper especially, we decided to adopt Chili Piper because there were a lot of demos that were being booked, and they weren't being equally distributed. So what Chili Piper allowed us to do is distribute the demos based on weighting, so that all the BDMs had the same amount of demos. And so that was just solving a problem. And I had issues with, let's just say, confirming demos or ensuring that we had a strong input, a strong demo attendance rate. We use Vidyard the night before. Our SDRs send videos, and if we're trying to penetrate like a large account and we want to get innovative, we know that we're sending out Vidyards. And so I think a lot of these like technologies are have definitely come into play over the last 6 months. Salesloft we use for our cadencing tool, and LinkedIn is for research purposes.
Brilliant, thanks, Samantha. It's interesting to hear how you've evolved, brought in new technologies as the company's evolved. And Colin, what's your tech stack, and how do you make decisions about what to use?
Yeah, I would say we are very similar. So of course we use Salesloft, LinkedIn Navigator very heavily, Salesforce. We use gifting tools like Sendoso and Alice, and I guess to give you a better example than a dog gift, which I gave earlier, for those, one of our reps the other day, one of the accounts they're working, they got most innovative product, and so we went on, they got this big trophy for it, and so we went on, we ordered this little plastic trophy, sent it to the VP of sales, and we said, hey, no one knows that you have the most innovative product, or no one knows your product unless the sales team does their job. You deserve a trophy too. And so we use gifting for examples like that. We're also heavy users of Vidyard, not only strategic in our cadence, but to decrease no-shows. Like we'll give it an agenda over Vidyard. We'll make a video saying, hey, really looking forward to connecting with you this afternoon. Here's our agenda for the call. If I left anything out, make sure to let me know, and we'll make it a priority. I think when I did this as an SDR, I went from like a 20% no-show rate to an 8 by personalizing, like, hey, we're really invested in this meeting. So we use Vidyard outside of just strategic cadence activities. And we use things like lean data for lead routing and things like that.
Great to hear, really great insights. So going to move on, and just at this point, just wanted to say there's a whole load of resources that we've got on both our Salesloft and Cognizant websites for further information should you have an interest. And that brings us to the Q&A section. So I've got a question for Dave, the dynamic entry. Dave, is it better to give an SDR line feedback across the desk, live feedback across the desk after a call, or take them into a room and do it away from everyone else?
So Colin, I hope you're ready for the Salesloft plug. But the beauty of Salesloft is, because that's what we're using internally, is you can actually do it. You can actually give some feedback in real time using some of their coaches. So we actually do that. If we can't pick it up in real time though, my advice is always try and do it in a safe space. Pretty much 90% of the time, it should always be in a safe space, just you and that individual, unless it's very, very, it's the kind of feedback that would really help the whole team and is, in no way kind of calling out that individual. That's the only exception to the rules. So something very, very general, and obviously just make sure you're communicating it in the most positive way possible. Colin, do you have any input on this one?
No, I think you nailed it. I think that's exactly it. I'll give feedback across a desk if I have a lot of good to say, or if it's a simple thing, like they did great on a call, and I'll give feedback. I'm like, you could have definitely set that demo. Why didn't we go for it? So I'll give, like, when you're around everybody, you don't want to put somebody on blast. And so if it's a call where there's a lot of coaching needed, that's when you jot it down, you save it, you put it in your one-on-one doc, and you review it in your one-on-one. Pretty much what you guys do.
Okay, and actually, Colin, whilst you're still, hot from that last question, I've got another one for you. This kind of relates to one of the earlier segues. Is what's difference between responsibilities of SDR1, SDR2, and SDR3?
So I'll say, one, you get different pay. So you get a bump in pay. So you get a little bit excited, but it comes with more responsibility. So SDR2s, you're eligible to do interviews at that point. So you can actually do peer interviews and decide if, it's the old like canoe saying, like, would you want to be in a canoe in the middle of the lake with this person? And we have SDRs conduct those interviews. You're eligible at that point to do those interviews. You're also eligible to be a mentor to an SDR1, and you get paid a little bit more. SDR3, you get paid a little bit more, but now you have the opportunity to be a team lead, and you're also putting together we have something called Sales Loft University, where you start putting together a resume to apply to your next position. And there's a lot of reflection that goes on, like, in my time as an SDR, what have I done to earn this spot? And you actually see a lot of maturity in that stage for SDR3.
Really like that, giving back to the system. So, got another question for Nazma. What are your thoughts on getting the sales team into a room first thing each morning to set themselves up for daily commitment targets, e.g. how many leads they will bring in each day?
Okay, so what are my thoughts in getting everyone into the sales team first thing each morning? I'm not too positive about that. I think we need to think about exactly how you're measuring the SDRs. If you're measuring them on daily calls, then I guess you can review at the end of the day how well they've done. But if you're anything like Cognizant, you review everything on a weekly basis, and what you'll find is some days aren't as strong as others. And so it could be that they have a bad Monday, and if they have a bad Monday, you don't want them to be constantly reflecting on the end of the day. They do a very good job of that themselves, and getting everyone in the team just basically might emphasize that they might not have had a great performance. So I would definitely wait until the end of the week and do it in a safe environment. And all of your SDRs should have a weekly meeting where you could talk around like what their commitment was in that week and how they performed and work towards that performance benchmark that they want to achieve. So I would definitely stay away from monitoring things on a daily basis, because I think that can come across potentially as micromanaging. But then if you do have an SDR that perhaps isn't performing and you see a dip in their activity, that's something definitely to raise. I think we should be setting the benchmarks for what their activity is, and not the other way around. So if they have, if they want to book a demo a day, we know that it should be, let's just say, 60 calls. And so if, for example, by the middle of the day, they've only made 5 calls, then that could be something that you raise that, hey, look, you're behind schedule, but in a safe environment. But I don't think that it should be something that's done on a daily basis. I think it could be quite overwhelming.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Nazma. So, yeah, that's it's been an absolutely fantastic webinar, how to build a high-performing sales team. There's been some awesome insights, and we've also seen firsthand versatility in action with the slight situation at the beginning. For me, there's been 3 really fantastic takeaways. Is characteristics of sales reps being resilience, achievement, and passion. I really enjoyed the teamship rules from Nazma, which I've seen firsthand. It's quite remarkable. And Colin, your persona, when you sold someone and you bring them in to actually meet all the sales reps, I think that's an awesome initiative. So yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. All that remains to be said is for you, the audience, if you'd like to, we're going to send out the recording of this webinar as well as the slides. And just want to say a huge thank you for Colin Waldrop, the SDR team lead at SalesLoft, and Nazma, SDR at Cognizant, and a guest appearance from Dave, SDR manager at Cognizant. Thank you to the audience for listening in, and goodbye.